This is Cortex. Cortex have 2 acres of land, a wife, 2 kids, and 300 compasses to his name. He was not rich and not poor. It was just enough for a happy family. And in one day, while Cortex was working in the farm, he heard his son screaming in loud. Cortex ran fast to check on his son. His son wasn't hurt, thankfully, but he was pointing on something looks weird and black on the ground. It smells bad, too. Cortex was wondering what it was and he wanted to just walk away. 3 days later, Cortex's old friend Dr. Petra had arrived. He was a scientist, and scientists love weird liquids. Petra looked at it, smelled it, looked at Cortex, and said 4 words. "You found oil, Cortex." Oil is what happens when ancient plants and animals die and get buried, then get cooked by the earth for about 300 million years. That pressure turns them into something the modern world cannot live without. Stuff like gasoline, plastics, cosmetics, even medicine. If you've touched anything today, there's a good chance oil was involved. Petra offered to bring the workers and set up the operation, and splitting the profits with Cortex. Cortex looked at his farm, his wheat farm, and he started doing some math. Then, Cortex agreed on the offer, and just like this, the wheat was gone. Extracting oil isn't simple. You need drills, pipelines, refineries, almost billions in equipments. That's why companies, not individuals, control most of the world's oil. So Cortex owned the land, but the company owned everything else. That distinction matters more than he understood at the time. Weeks passed, then months. Petra always said the same thing. Soon. But then something bigger happened. New oil reserves were discovered all across the Republic. Everyone was getting rich. New houses, new carriages. The whole country was celebrating. When a country finds oil, they will start selling it, and the money floods in. The economy starts growing, and the people surely will start spending more. Automatically, the prices will start rising, but for a while, it feels like winning. Then Petra showed up with Cortex's check. 5,000 compasses as a revenue from the oil sales. Cortex looked at the number, then at his old farmland, then at the number again. After that, they even moved to a bigger house. Life was good, really good. But here's the thing nobody talked about. While everyone was counting their compasses, nobody was farming anymore. Nobody was building. Nobody was making anything. Through history, this thing happened multiple times, and it called the Dutch disease. It was named after the Netherlands in the 1960s. They found natural gas, and their entire manufacturing sector collapsed almost overnight. When oil money floods in, your currency gets stronger. And when your currency is stronger, everything you make becomes too expensive for other countries to buy. So they stop buying, and by that, you stop making. Venezuela is the most complete version of this story the world has ever seen. They sit on more oil than Saudi Arabia, more than any country on the planet. And in the early 2000s, oil prices were high. The government used oil money to fund hospitals, schools, food subsidies. Poverty dropped. It looked like it was working, but nothing stays the same forever. The oil prices crashed, and the government had spent everything. No savings, no other industries, and no backup plan. And by 2018, the inflation hit 1,000,000%. A bag of rice cost more than a month's salary. People left the country by the millions. Not because Venezuela ran out of oil, they still had the oil, but the damage had already been done to everything else. Cortex looked around his old town. The farms were empty. The craftsmen were gone. Everything ran on oil money, and the oil money was starting to slow down. In the other hand, Norway and many countries like Saudi Arabia and others discovered oil, and they invested in the infrastructure and other things like building and developing the tourism industry. And some, instead of spending it all, they saved it in a fund. Today, that fund in Norway alone is worth over $1.7 trillion. It owns about 1.5% of every publicly listed company in the world. Every Norwegian citizen is technically a millionaire on paper. It was the same resource. But it was two completely different decisions, and that resulted in two completely different futures. Petra stopped coming, and the company packed up. Cortex stood in what used to be his wheat field with 200 compasses and a lesson he hadn't asked for. The oil was still there, it just wasn't his anymore. And the thing that was supposed to make everything easier had made everything harder. Life went back to normal. The same city and the same market, same compasses, just fewer of them. But while Cortex was walking in the town, he saw a new poster on the wall. He read it, and some thoughts started coming to him. But before we close this out, we will talk what's happening with oil in the real world. Because this isn't just Cortex's story. Flying to Venezuela, the largest oil reserves on the planet. January this year, the US military captured President Maduro and flew him out of the country. Everyone was expecting the gas prices to go down, but they barely moved. That happened because Venezuela's industry is already so destroyed after decades of mismanagement. They now produce less than 1% of global supply. Meanwhile, in Russia, after the Ukrainian war, the world tried to cap the price of Russian oil at $60 a barrel. The idea was to starve the war funding without fully cutting off supply. Because if they cut it totally, it will cause raises in the gas prices. Now the Russian oil is selling at nearly $27 below the global price. They're still selling just for a lot less. And by February 28th this year, the US and Israel struck Iran. And Iran did something nobody had done in modern history. They did close the Strait of Hormuz, a passage 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. The single choke point that carries 20% of the world's entire oil supply. The insurance companies refused to cover ships going near it. That made most of the tankers stopping there for weeks. The International Energy Agency reports showed that this conflict made the oil prices higher than the 1973 oil crisis, when Saudi Arabia and many countries refused to sell oil to the world to force them to stop the war on Egypt. Countries like China and India gets at least third up to 60% of their oil through that strait. That made the whole Asian and the rest of the world economy suffer from this crisis, and it made the prices in the whole world higher than it was before, and it added so much concerns about what is going to happen next.